You're here. Welcome to Suncor Presents The Walrus Talks Energy. My name is Shelley Ambrose. I'm the Executive Director of the Walrus. We're thrilled to be here at the Vancouver Convention Centre and would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. There's a rich history of sharing and conversation here, and we're happy to continue that tradition this evening. The Walrus started 17 years ago as an optimistic project to foster conversation across Canada. We recognize that these conversations are complex and necessary, and so they take many forms at the Walrus. We spark conversations through fact-based journalism. We didn't used to have to say that. We used to just say journalism, but now we say fact-based journalism because we have real live human fact checkers, and we might be the only one left. So we spark conversation through fact-based journalism in the Walrus magazine, which you have on the table in front of you. We also do it daily at thewalrus.ca, so you can read it on your phone, and we do it by publishing the Walrus books, and we do it in rooms like this from coast to coast to coast at the Walrus Talks. So no matter where the Walrus is or how it is consumed, we embrace our commitment to be independent and to share multiple perspectives, to bring together a community of interesting and interested people who care about the issues that matter most to us as Canadians. So thank you for joining us and for being a part of the Walrus. So hands up if you read the Walrus, however and wherever you read it. Thank you very much. Hands up if you pay for the journalism you read by subscribing or donating to our cause. You are my people. Thank you, my people. Hands up if you've been to a Walrus Talks before. Welcome back. Hands up if you're brand new. Let's welcome the new people. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Suncor Energy for making this event possible. Suncor has supported 11 iterations of the Walrus Talks Energy across Canada over the years, and we're very grateful for their support of these conversations. We're also grateful to Chris Henderson, Mike Gerbis, and the entire Globe Series team for inviting the Walrus to return to Globe for the third time as part of the Globe Forum. To tell you a little bit more about the Globe Series, we're delighted to have with us the CEO, Mike Gerbis. Please welcome Mike to say a few words. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Shelley, and thanks to the Walrus Group to continuing to have these amazing talks across the country. As you said, this is your 11th, right?
The 11th one with Suncor.
Yeah, 11th one with Suncor, and it's the third with the Globe Forum. So those of you that don't know, Globe Series puts on an international forum here at the Convention Centre every 2 years, which is the largest and longest standing. It's our 30th anniversary this year. Sustainability Conference and Clean Tech Innovation showcase. So it's an amazing time to bring together people, to have a dialogue, to have uncomfortable conversations, and it's our third time partnering with the Walrus, which we're thrilled about. I also want to thank Suncor Energy, who's been a committed sponsor for years, both to the Globe Forum and also Leading Change, which is a not-for-profit that brings young people together into this conversation. I also want to recognize the Walrus, our partner, for being a beacon of Canadian independent journalism, of fact-based reporting, as Shelley said, especially since we're all living in an era of misinformation and propaganda. We could not agree more with their team that a healthy society relies on informed citizens. We can only address climate change and other major issues across this country at a scale and speed that we need to if there is political will, individual and business leadership, and we can do it. We can do it together. Equipping Canadians with information, insights, and analysis is an essential part of creating the political will and the business will and the individual desire to make change. Finally, I want to say that we appreciate the Walrus for providing a platform for discussing thought-provoking and for thought-provoking ideas and for Canadians to learn about the issues that matter. So thank you to the Walrus. I hope you all enjoy the evening, and I look forward to next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike, and everyone at Globe. It is actually, tonight is our 146th Walrus Talks event. Yes, and we've been everywhere. You know that song. So the conversation around clean energy transition is increasingly important in Canada and abroad. And tonight you'll hear from 7 people, 7 different perspectives: researchers, journalists, entrepreneurs, and advocates from the energy sector and beyond. Here is how, for the newbies, here is how the Walrus Talks works, how it always works. Each talker has 7 minutes. They know this. Each talker has 7 minutes, and there are 7 of them. Each will come up and introduce themselves. Please grab a program from your table. The front is in speaker order. Their bios are on the back. We know you can follow along. I do not come up here like a jack-in-the-box in between each of them and introduce them. You follow along. They will introduce themselves. You will see and hear 7 talkers in a row, and when they are finished and I come back up to thank them, after that we'll have a lot to talk about at the post-talks reception, to which you are all invited. It will happen in that back corner where the bar is. So just before I let them, they will come to the podium. These are not our chairs. So it will all happen right here at the podium. And just before I let our talkers get underway, I'd like to thank each in advance. Thank you to energy journalist and author Chris Turner. Thank you to President and CEO of Manitoba Hydro, Jay Grewal. Thank you to Youth Outreach Coordinator at Stoney Health Services, Cory Beaver. Thank you to Chairman at Parker Venture Management, Nicholas Parker. Thank you to Director at the Indigenous Clean Energy Social Enterprise, Eryn Stewart. Thank you to Energy Futures Lab Communications Lead, Nagwan Al-Guneid. Thank you to Energy Peace Partners Managing Director, Sherwin. And thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
Good evening. I'm Chris Turner, and I am going to be talking to you tonight, once we get moving here, about Canada's climate leadership, climate change action, global energy transition, our leadership in that field. And if you sort of roll the phrase around in your head, Canada's climate change leadership, I can anticipate, some of the possible responses depending on your point of view, your politics. You might be thinking, "Oh, come on," as if there's any such thing. What kind of leadership have we shown on any of this? Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, we do some stuff, I guess. We're part of it, I guess, right? We're doing okay. The one thing I can anticipate, though, is probably not a whole lot of hell yeah, we're leading this. We're way out in front. Go Canada. It doesn't inspire that kind of response, at least not yet. But I do have nearly 7 minutes left, so let's see where we get to on the subject of Canada's climate change leadership. It's very easy to see where that "oh, come on" response comes from, because you can kind of look at where we're at right now and say to yourself, this is not a picture of climate leadership. The best-selling motor vehicle, private motor vehicle in the country, the Ford F-150, a very large, not terribly fuel-efficient truck. Most of the top 10 best-selling passenger vehicles in the country are trucks or SUVs, large vehicles, not known for their fuel economy. That is not seemingly where we put our priorities as far as transportation. As many of us in the last generation or two, our preferred choice of residence, where we choose to make our lives, is in a single-family house in a sprawling suburb that can only really be accessed properly by private car. houses weren't built to maximize efficiency or anything else. Really not a lifestyle that you immediately look at and think there's some climate leadership for you. And then on top of that, we spend an enormous amount of our time in public life, in politics and beyond, arguing where should the next pipeline go to move which bunch of oil or gas to which market, while we continue to perpetuate a status quo that we know is has us on course for catastrophic climate change. So you look at this picture and you say to yourself, this does not look like a snapshot of climate leadership. Surely there are other countries out there just absolutely embarrassing us with their leadership. For example, Germany. There's a country that I've talked about in terms of their climate leadership quite a lot, and with good cause. Renewable energy, the global energy transition, energy efficiency. Germany decided a generation ago, around about 20 years ago, that they would become one of the leading the first major industrial nation to drive hard to that goal. When they began, their electricity grid had less than 5% non-emitting sources on it. Now it's more than 40%. Very, very impressive achievement, an achievement that was often scoffed at as potentially impossible, catastrophic to their economy to pursue, and here they are 20 years along, showing real leadership in that role. Along the way, hundreds of thousands of jobs created in the clean tech sector in Germany. The fact that solar panels are cheap the world over is largely thanks to German leadership, and so on and so on. So definitely you look at Germany and you think, now there's leadership. On the other hand, look closer at Germany, and what you'll find is they too are kind of mired in a little bit of tug-of-war with the status quo. In their case, for reasons that mainly had to do with sort of saving the sort of political skin of the government of the day, rather than phasing out coal from their electricity grid, they phased out nuclear. And that's meant that they've had to perpetuate the use of their coal, which they have quite a lot of domestically, and it's meant that their emissions are flat. And in fact, German leadership on the one front is sort of balanced now by the fact that they are still continuing to struggle along on another front. So if Germany's not that sort of shining example that we need to be chasing, who might be? Well, another country that's done a lot of amazing stuff on the climate leadership front, Costa Rica. Costa Rica, you hear often, it's the great green ecotourist country. Big headlines recently, 100% renewables, and that's true. The majority, nearly 100% of Costa Rica's electricity is non-emitting. Most of it is good old-fashioned hydropower, which is not that strange to Canadians, particularly not in British Columbia, and really is not so much a testament to the fact that Costa Ricans were so much more enlightened than the rest of us, but that it is a very wet, very mountainous little country where hooking up hydropower is relatively simple and cheap to do across just about the entire country. That said, you've probably heard, didn't they say they were going to be net zero for emissions within a couple of years? Didn't they have a new president who's this young, dynamic guy? And there is some truth to that, but in fact, what Costa Rica wound up doing was saying, we will have a plan to get to net zero in place by 2021 in order to meet that target by 2050. And when you put it that way, it sounds a little less ambitious. And part of the reason why it sounds so much less ambitious is because the largest chunk of Costa Rica's emissions now come from transportation. And for most Costa Ricans, this is what transportation looks like. There are a few countries on Earth as car-dependent, as internal combustion engine-dependent as Costa Rica. The main population center, the capital of San Jose, and surrounding cities that attach to it, entirely clogged with traffic, virtually 24 hours a day, it seems. They have said, we are going to have fast, efficient LRTs. We're going to start construction on those in just a few years. But at present, there is one not terribly efficient passenger train running on a single track, heavy gauge track that was already there, and that took 12 years for them to get in place and get up and running. So while there's a lot to admire about the Costa Rican example, you look at it a little more closely, you're not necessarily seeing wild, out-of-control leadership. So what about Norway? There's another country you hear about that's been doing amazing leadership kind of stuff. Again, electric vehicles, they are absolutely the pace setter, no question. They are, investing their oil wealth in around the world. They're showing some really spectacular leadership in divesting from fossil fuels around the world. At the same time, Norway is also continuing to drill offshore for new sources of oil in the North Sea, continuing to consider the possibility of exploring the Arctic for even more oil. So again, you look at it a little more closely and you begin to think, you know, maybe Canada's not as far from leadership as any of these other countries. Yes, our politics are a crazy muddle, pushing this way, pulling back the other. Yes, we're doing a lot of things wrong. There's no question about that. On the other hand, we are starting to get a few things right. We begin from the fact that 80% of our grid nationally is already non-emitting. We never think of it that way. We never put it all together and say, well, we've got all this hydropower and nuclear power and now some solar and wind across the country. And look at that, we have a 80+% non-emitting grid. We never talk about it as a national asset, let alone something to be proud of. But that's the fact of it. We begin from a place that Germany can only envy. On top of that, we have done a couple of things recently that are, in fact, making us a bit of an envy. We have a carbon price in place nationwide. We are phasing out coal nationwide. We have efficiency measures already built into provincial planning across the country that if we only did those efficiency measures and nothing else, we could hit a third of our Paris emissions goals by 2030. All this already in place, all this already being pursued, even as we sit around talking about all the things we do wrong. And in fact, Mark Jacquard of Simon Fraser University recently in the Globe and Mail wrote that he found that there was a consensus of foreign experts at the last IPCC meeting he attended who agreed that Canada had become a global leader in climate policy, that we were actually way out front. And so maybe part of the problem is that we're not talking about that side of Canada's pursuit of excellence quite enough. We're not talking about the fact that the passive house concept, which was developed originally in Canada and then got perfected by the Germans, is now moving back to places like Vancouver and buildings like this one, where you have a net zero house at apartment scale, and what's more, where every single building built in the province of British Columbia by 2032, new and retrofit, will be also net zero. And that's not an ambitious target or a lofty goal. There are actual measures in place, step by step, to get there. That is, in fact, true leadership. And I think we do need to be celebrating it a bit more. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip past the talk about war footing or green Marshall plans or how to get to any of these. What I will say, though, is when you look at what the world needs, which is a lot more of this kind of stuff. You see leadership all over the world, from Germany with solar house design, Tesla with its leadership in automobiles, electric buses being churned out by factories in China, offshore wind being developed, floating offshore wind by companies in Norway. There is still a lot of room there for Canada to take the lead. And I think what we need to do is to begin to acknowledge we are already very, very much committed and very, very much becoming part of the pace-setting group of nations that is going to build that low-carbon future. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jay Grewal, and I'm the President and CEO of Manitoba Hydro. So for my 7 minutes, I'd talk about something that is going to impact not only my utility, Manitoba Hydro, but utilities worldwide, and that is a changing, evolving energy value chain. Three main disruptors are driving this change. And as a result of that change, we are going to see a pace of change that is greater than we've seen since post-war mass electrification of our industry. The pace of change we are going to see is what we saw in the telecom industry over the last 20 years, but it's actually going to happen even faster because technology has advanced so much in the 20 years. So there's three factors that are impacting utilities going forward, and they are what we call the 3 Ds: decarbonization, decentralization, and digitization. Let's talk about decarbonization. On decarbonization, as governments look to reduce carbon emissions, renewable electricity, as we all know, is going to play an increasingly important role. And it's not just the transportation sector. It is going to see tremendous growth in the electrification of everything, of industry, of heating. The drive to decarbonization is not confined to any one region or market. In Manitoba, we are a hydro-based province. 99% of the electricity we produce is renewable. It's non-GHG emitting. So we're ahead of the curve, but we're ahead in some ways, but we also have risks in others. So we export power to the US markets. A lot of our customers in the US markets are heavily reliant on coal. They have set, some are exploring, and some have set in legislation and adopted it, that by 2050, they will reduce their emissions by 80 to 100%. Some are being aggressive and saying 2040, and others are even saying earlier. Here in Canada, we have the federal carbon charge, and with recent changes to environmental legislation, we're seeing the shift towards renewables increasing. And by that, we're talking more hydro, wind, and solar. So for those that are in this industry already, we need to think about what is the impact of these changes on generation and transmission and local distribution. A major component driving decarbonization is the improving battery technology. It's driving a paradigm shift where cars, buses, fleets in the coming years will be using electricity as their energy source. And this change is happening so much faster than anybody anticipates. The forecast for all new cars by 2030 to be electric. And some are saying by 2040 we may see hydrogen. For utilities, the challenges are multiple. Technically, how do we accommodate everyone starting up their cars when they get home or at any time of day? It's described as houses moving around on your grid, and you don't know when that house is going to want energy. How do we manage that? How do we also take advantage of the fact that batteries store power and energy that we could use to optimize peak and manage our generation in a much more effective way? So how do we position ourselves with the electrification of transportation? In a country where federally we're talking about an electrified western-eastern transportation corridor, in a country where we've got incentives for electric vehicles. Chargers. Tesla's just completed the last charging station from Vancouver to Manitoba, and they're now focusing on building it out in the east. For each province, the model will be different as to how the electrification of transportation will be managed. The second D is decentralization. And what do we mean by that? It's the rise of renewable distributed generation, photovoltaic rooftop cells. We ran a solar project pilot at Manitoba Hydro, and there was huge uptake, much greater than we anticipated. Yes, it was subsidized because we were testing solar and to see how we would manage it in our distribution system and grid. But when the economics make sense, you see globally solar will play a more and more important role going forward. And what's interesting is that solar cells are evolving so quickly and becoming so much more efficient. It's unimaginable 10 years ago what they are able to do now. Smart energy controllers can send excess power back to the customer, back to the grid. It gives us the potential to balance our local energy and demand peaks. It also offers savings to our customers because they sell energy back to us, net metering. In the future, they will store this excess energy from their renewables in batteries. The batteries can be in their car, or it can be larger scale utility batteries. When utility scale storage becomes effective and efficient, it will change our industry. And make no doubt about it, that will happen because there are tens of billions of dollars chasing those solutions. The big issue is once the costs of this technology become low enough, we reach something called grid parity. And what is that? It's when the cost to generate energy through your utility is equal to or less than your cost to use renewables. And then you don't buy the power from the grid. We're going to see grid parity, but more importantly, grid defection when customers will unplug from the local utility. And this is going to leave stranded assets. It's going to create unreliability in the grid, and those fewer customers who don't have the ability to pursue renewables will be the ones that are going to bear most of the cost. And they are the ones that are least able to, and the concept of energy poverty is emerging. Tesla is now renting solar panels for $50 a month in select cities in the US. They will bring the solar in, they'll install it on a monthly basis, and they'll remove it if you don't want it. The models are fundamentally shifting, and what we need to do as utilities is prepare for that new reality. And what is the role we play in reliability and in safety and keeping it as low cost as possible so all of our customers make informed choices. The model is changing, make no doubt about that. What we don't know is the pace of change. And the challenge is, how do you plan for that in this new evolving energy landscape? And this change will be happening in the coming 10 years. This is not a decade or 2 decades out. The change we will see will be material, and it will have an impact on you, our customers, with choice, but also there are risks that we are looking to mitigate through federal policy, through legislation and regulations. Thank you so much.
Can you guys sit naked in your chairs so I'm not nervous? I'm just kidding. I also want to acknowledge, before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional ancestral lands of the Shalis coastal nations, including the Musqueam, the Stolo, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. As a guest from another territory, thank you for having me here today. I would also like to take a brief moment and bring your attention to the fact that 2 years ago today, on a winter month like this one, the justice system failed us, and Gerald Stanley was acquitted for the murder of Colton Bushi. Hello, I'm Boastich. Cory Beaver emangyabich, Iethka hemanchach, Minithni hedahawahich. Isnish pinamavich netseni an ia animagyabne nangambane. My name is Cory Beaver. I'm a member of the Iyarhe Nakota Nation in Morley, Alberta. Iethka means one who is of a pure language. We Nakota people always speak with good intentions, are very direct, and always mean well. Long ago, before contact, our people thrived and lived in harmony with Mother Nature. Our people had agency and laws that they followed, and we only took what we needed and were very abundant and prosperous people. Indigenous people around the world are stewards of the land, have long been stewards of the land, with a strong relationship forming, an intrinsic part of our identities. Our land is our identity. Our languages is our identity. Our traditional practices is our identity. And all these things are all interconnected. One simply cannot thrive without the other. When you take our land away, you also take the very right to exist. The very right to communicate with our ancestors, because it is our inherent right. It always was and always will be. I say this as I think of the Wet'suwet'en Nation fighting to protect their land and territory in the face of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. So you understand when we say no to land developments and no to new clearings for new pipelines, we are acknowledging our history and teachings and the need to carry our identity forward, to protect Mother Earth for our people and for everyone we share the land with. Because of our relationship with the earth, Indigenous people have long been innovators, constantly working hand in hand with nature to evolve and provide for our land alongside our people. 2017 was the year I started taking climate action. I attended a climate change workshop in Calgary. It was also the year I was invited to a Suncor gathering. I also met some important people at the time who would become teachers and mentors of mine on this journey. Through that, I was invited to the International Student Energy Summit in Merida, Mexico that year. I remember being so inspired and energized. The fact that I was only one of 2 Indigenous youths in attendance from Canada was a privilege, but I think it was also what sparked my fire. In 2018, a group of us got together and envisioned 7Gen, the first Indigenous Student Energy Summit in Canada, for Indigenous youth by Indigenous youth. This journey began when I was invited to attend Globe 2018 for the day to participate in a roundtable discussion with Minister Carr, then Minister of Natural Resources. In the discussion, he asked, "Where do you see Canada in the next 20 years?" I turned to him and said, "I can't see the same Canada in 20 years until there is clean drinking water in First Nations communities, until the environment is better protected and cared for, until the injustices of Tina Fontaine and Colton Boushie and all other unsolved murder cases are acknowledged, including the missing and murdered Indigenous women, until Canada acknowledges the system that is built to go against Indigenous people, I do not see the same Canada you do in 20 years." He simply had no response. These realities have led me to an awakening and an enlightenment to work harder, to empower and advocate for Indigenous youth, because my generation and generations after me will be the light to continue paving the way for them. We don't need responses, but we do need actions. In 2019, we executed 7Gen. This event has sparked other movements and other ideas to engage more young Indigenous leaders to get involved in energy and climate work. This is the one way we can show that there are opportunities and platforms to have the voices of Indigenous youth heard. I hope my story inspires you to be better allies as you move forward doing your part on truth and reconciliation. We all need to hold each other accountable. We need to do better. You being here tonight is part of this story that will continue on as Canada moves forward together on this energy transition. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Nicholas Parker, and it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here this evening and to have heard the previous speakers. I hope I don't let them down. My job this evening is to talk to you about clean tech in the 2020s and how exponential technologies are going to enable us to have exponential impact. So nearly 20 years ago, I coined the term clean tech, actually on a canoe trip in Algonquin Park. And at that time, clean tech represented virtually no venture capital investments. Within about 5 years, clean tech became the largest single investment area for venture capitalists in the United States. And this proceeded through the 2000s. When we got to this past decade, the numbers started to go even higher. Whereas from 2005 to 2010, about $30 billion was invested in clean tech innovation by venture capitalists and so on. Just in the last 2 years, each year has seen over $30 billion invested in clean tech. And now about a third of all the deals are being done with corporations and other new capital providers. So we've had a lot of innovation, thousands of rounds of financing, and we now have a blueprint for what we need to do on the world, the so-called SDGs, the Global Goals for Sustainable Development. Most people see this as a public policy issue or a social issue. We see it as a business opportunity, a $15 to $20 trillion market opportunity between now and 2030, and that's without assuming a price on carbon and so on and so forth. McKinsey, the well-known consultancy, says just improving resource productivity and efficiency is a $4 trillion market opportunity. So we've got the innovation, we've got the business opportunity, but we're not getting there. And for those of us who've been at the Globe Conference this week, we know we have the solutions, but we have massive challenges. We're in the Anthropocene era, where we're now using 1.5 times the world's annual regenerative capacity. We're essentially liquidating planet Earth, but calling it income. If you're an accountant, you'll get that. And we're in ecological overshoot in so many other ways, including biological annihilation, as the IUCN would call it. So we've got exponential challenges. Climate change is simply a symptom of those challenges, and that requires us to have exponential solutions to those challenges. Many of us have taught our kids how to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but really we should have taught them how to count 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, so they understand not only credit card debt, but also the challenges of environmental degradation. And the good news is we have new tools in addition to the clean tech innovation that we've seen over the last 2 decades. We now have lean service models. We now have the circular economy concept, and we now have things like the sharing economy through platforms and so on. So what do we mean by all of this? What is the exponential stuff all about? Well, it's getting a lot of attention. Just a few weeks ago at the World Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum organizers, along with PwC, a consulting and accounting firm, issued the report that you can see on the screen behind me. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, known for their work in circularity, recently came out with another report on the application of artificial intelligence to that. So what is all this exponential stuff about? Well, Singularity University has been very helpful in identifying the technologies and the business models arising from them that lead us into exponential change and exponential possibilities. Many of us know about artificial intelligence or machine learning, a subset of that. Some of us know about the Internet of Things or Internet of Everythings, and so on. We also have blockchain, which is somewhat affiliated with cryptocurrencies, but doesn't necessarily have to be, and so on and so forth. So if you just take AI and the circular economy, we have the ability to design things differently, the ability to develop new tools operationally, and to optimize how we use resources. So essentially, we can mimic nature, we can manage complexity, we can do radical resource efficiency, and as importantly, we can be transparent about what we're doing and who's doing what with whom. So in a way, the technology in itself is not the answer. It's the business models and the social models that arise from it. So, for example, we've had platforms, but we've realized so many of these platforms are actually flatforms because they don't take into account environmental and social considerations. So we need to have a more integrated, holistic approach. But the good news is there's thousands of new companies starting up around these concepts, coming out of places like MIT, the HULT Prize Initiative, the UN Unleash organization, and so on and so forth. And most of these initiatives are fueled by millennials who don't want to have impact. They don't want to just do things less badly. They actually believe and want to solve things. They want to get the job done. So I'll come back with a couple of examples of what that means and what it means to Canada. But where I'm seeing the most innovation is leapfrogging in the developing world. So the best example I have of this that relates to the audience perhaps here this evening is in the area of solar energy. When I first invested in solar energy 20 years ago and took a company public on NASDAQ, the stock exchange in the US, there was a 0.5 gigawatt of solar installed worldwide. Well, meanwhile, prices have come down 80%, markets have grown over 50x, and now solar is a commodity. But it's the application of exponential technologies with cheap solar that is leading to all kinds of fantastic outcomes. 2 examples, and I come with a health warning because I'm invested in both these companies. One is in Nairobi, Kenya, called Mkopa, that is taking what I call mobile payment systems and smart analytics and empowering people in rural areas of East Africa and beyond who've traditionally had to rely upon things like kerosene, which is dirty and dangerous and expensive. And now using mobile payment systems and cheap solar, they can provide people with the means to join the modern energy economy. In Cambodia and Southeast Asia, another company, Aqua Solar, started by young Australian data scientists originally from Bangladesh, is using machine learning and taking machine learning, cheap solar, combining it into something called microgrid as a service, and taking it to the 200 million households, 1 billion people who are off the electrical grid right now and can't join the modern economy. They've been trialing this for the last 2 years. It's working. I've seen it myself in rural Cambodia. And now we're moving on to figuring out how can we help people with create livelihoods and other benefits, health benefits, and so on. So we've got the tools. And so what does it mean for Canada? In short, because I realize I'm out of time, we have to bring together the things that we're very good at, AI, blockchain, and so on, and integrate it into our strategies around the emerging clean economy. As you can see on the screen behind me, we've got some great companies from coast to coast, MindSense in this part of the world, Myovision, where I live in Toronto, and so on and so forth, in all kinds of different sectors and areas. This is our moment. I'm launching a new initiative called the Planet Exponential Impact Collaborative. Happy to chat with anybody and everybody after about this. I just say, possibilitarians of the world, unite. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Eryn Stewart. So I'm very fortunate to be up here on this stage today and have this platform. And if I don't share this story, I feel as though I'm doing a great disservice to the sustainability sector. Yesterday, Natural Resources Canada hosted a workshop on diversity and inclusion in the sustainability sector. There were over 75 businesses that were invited to this event. Youth, minority groups, Indigenous people, peoples with disabilities were asked to come and share their experience and their knowledge on this topic, and only 3 people showed up. If we're going to stress the importance of diversity in this sector, we need to show up, and we need to be in this room because our actions here speak much louder than our words. Greta Thunberg, she's an incredible activist, an empowering youth, a VIP in the climate sphere. And though she's a VIP, we cannot individualize her actions. She is but a voice for the power of the masses, but where the real change lies is actually in the rest of the pyramid. So in our work, we really are focused on the person right here. There's a person in the orange that seems to be holding up somebody's entire body with their head and managing this entire structure. These are the very impactful people, the VIPs. And I have the privilege to work with the most inspiring people I've ever met in my life. These are Indigenous clean energy champions that are truly guiding the way towards energy transition. And that's not lip service. I mean that, and I have 3 facts to prove that. Number 1, there are over 160 clean energy projects, 1 megawatt or larger, that have significant Indigenous leadership and ownership. Number 2, this participation in the sector makes up 25% of Canada's electricity grid. Number 3, Indigenous involvement in the electricity sector far surpasses that of municipalities by a significant margin. These are facts that we do not talk about at all. So, these very impactful people, the people on the ground doing the work, especially in small communities, they're often wearing many hats. And when we talk about things like the SDGs, we talk about them from a holistic perspective. We also go really in depth in terms of their implementation. But when it comes to implementing SDGs in the ground in communities, it usually falls on one individual or a couple of individuals, and that's a lot of work. And so that's why I must stress again that when Indigenous communities take the time to attend something like a diversity session, the business and community and the government need to show up because they are truly the busiest people in the room. So our organization specifically focuses on supporting Indigenous communities and champions take the driver's seat on the clean energy projects that they would like to pursue. We run a program called the 2020 Catalyst Program, which is a national Indigenous clean energy capacity building program. And in this program, we cover a full spectrum of opportunities in the energy sector, from understanding energy systems, energy education, jobs and training, and ultimately project development. And our program is led by 35+ mentors, and these are Indigenous champions that have done projects in their own communities, as well as technical support mentors that have supported communities along their energy journey. And the momentum that we've seen has been absolutely incredible over the last 4 years. We have had 82 participants from almost every province and territory go through our programming. And the best part about it is that the participants, once they're doing their projects, they're actually becoming mentors and continuing that learning process. And I believe that this success has occurred because we're truly creating a space that's together. We have created a space in the energy sector where people feel empowered to collaborate, to have the opportunity to learn without judgment, to be motivated, and most importantly, to do real projects on the ground. So if you would like to get involved in them, there is an opportunity. You can go on to icenet.work, and we do host free monthly webinars that are open for absolutely everybody. But I do find it disheartening that we have so many Indigenous knowledge keepers in this country, and they've told us about the impacts of climate change for generations. They continue to stand on the front lines of key environmental issues, and yet their words have largely fallen on deaf ears. So Greta, she's an incredibly inspiring person, but to me, the real VIP in this pictures are the people on either side of her. And I could go and tell you about their story, but instead I'd much rather use the rest of the time here at Walrus so that I allow Councillor Walklin, to speak for himself. Thanks.
Tanse, Inglanate, bonjour, and hello. I'm Councillor Calvin Walklin from the Mikisew Cree First Nation, president of Three Nations Energy, which owns and operates a 2.2 megawatt solar farm that will offset 25% of our diesel usage, which is 800,000 liters. I live in a diesel-reliant community that is landlocked, only accessible by Winter Road. So we had to do something different in our community to transition into a climate-friendly economy. And with being one of the hugest investors or beneficiaries of the oil sands, we invested in with Fort McKay into an East Tank Farm deal. Maybe some of you are familiar with the $545 million business option we made with our people to invest into our future. But we take our profits from the oil sands or impact benefits agreements to retrofit our housing, to add sustainability, to add to our energy sovereignty that is going to come into the future as we split and add sovereignty from Canada into our nation. You know, we talk about VIPs, we talk about the important people at the top, but in our generation and in my nation, everything is cyclical and everybody has a chance at the top. And I think we're just a vessel of energy moving through time. So I'm going to spend my time moving my energy in a positive way for my people to be impacted in a positive way. So the monies that we're taking from oil industry, we're investing into tiny homes. We're doing community energy planning. We're doing cabin solar packages. We're electrifying our way of life, looking at skidoos, looking at boating, looking at electric cycling programs that is already on the go. These are the kind of movements that we'd like to see from other First Nations, and this isn't possible just by ourselves. It's possible by governments, industry, and people like yourselves putting our energy together and walking as one into a friendly economy for everybody to benefit and everybody to be proud of. And Okse, thank you, Kanana Skumten, and have a good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nagwan Al-Guneid. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, what's the hype all about? It seems that AI hasn't just been the flavor of the year, but the last 3 years. And bright people know, if you want to sound smart these days, just put the word AI or blockchain somewhere in your sentence. I was first exposed to machine learning when I saw this video at my husband's PhD defense. Machine learning is applied here to simulate blood clotting for medical education. All I remember is how fascinated I was by the application of this technology and its potential in different industries. Fast forward 13 iPhone generations later, I'm part of the Energy Futures Lab, advancing the Energy.ai initiative. Energy.ai is exploring the intersection of tech applications in the energy industry to find environmental and climate solutions. By energy, I refer to oil and gas, power, electricity, heat, and renewables. Why did the EFL and its many partners implement this initiative? First, energy transformation is happening. We need to reduce our overall emissions and from all sectors in order to be fit for the future and to thrive in this energy transition. Second, this initiative matches the raison d'être of a lab that experiments, prototypes, fails, learns, and tries again. We're playing in the solution space to reduce emissions. AI is just one tool to solve environmental problems, just as it's applied to find cancerous lumps in radiology or to simulate clotting. The energy sector is creating a market of good problems for AI applications. We've tried 6 prototypes at the Energy Futures Lab. I'll talk about one that touches on physical assets and one that speaks to our discourse around energy. First, the oil and gas facility energy efficiency. This prototype uses Google's machine learning experience with data centers to develop and train a machine learning model to predict facility energy use. When we predict energy use, we're talking about efficiency, which means, yes, saving cost, but also saving tons of emissions. The ambition here is to build an ML model that uses existing performance data from one oil and gas facility to accurately predict, then optimize energy use. Google's model for data centers predicted energy use with 99.6% accuracy, allowing Google to achieve an increase of 40% energy efficiency of an already highly efficient facility. The second initiative is the Good Bots prototype. This is in relation to the polarization on energy issues. We're essentially left with 2 narratives: drill, baby, drill, or leave it in the ground. The discourse is binary. And we see it in politicians' rhetoric, on social media, and among many Canadians. The Good Bots prototype is an experiment that seeks to address how bots are currently used in social media to reinforce entrenched polarized views, and how can we train good bots to identify polarizing messaging and counter with different viewpoints. As a lab focused on experimentation, we're always looking to draw lessons and insights. I'd like to share 2. The first is about articulating the problem. In the EFL's multi-stakeholder platform, we noticed that AI innovators would often ask, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Many respond, climate, emissions, the big topics. Yes, but what is the problem? We learned quickly that we need to be laser-focused on the specific problem with specific data and certain parameters. So if we're talking energy efficiency, we need to zoom in on the data, on the parameters around efficiency. The second learning is about the need for bridgers. Bridgers are AI and energy innovators who know the energy industries and are dangerous enough in AI to understand its applications. Bridgers are translators. They advance solutions and make the collaborative process more effective. What I would like to end on is that we do not have a silver bullet to environmental solutions. Energy.ai is about expanding the solutions toolbox for climate. This is about social innovation meeting technological innovation. This is about the value of collaboration in a multi-stakeholder platform. Collaboration is key to solving energy issues and to reducing emissions. The people who hold the problem do not necessarily have the knowledge around AI as a solution. And AI folks do not have the deep knowledge of energy problems that AI can solve. The EFL experimented with two data points here, energy and technology. Imagine the possibilities if we add a third or a fourth discipline into this prototype. I'm sure there are at least 30 ideas in this room. We need to democratize knowledge. We need to connect and bridge between disciplines to advance multiple solutions, to reduce emissions, solve environmental challenges, and thrive in this energy transition. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sherwin, and I'd like to start by showing you an image taken recently by one of our partner organizations in the Democratic Republic of Congo. These are Congolese children watching Saturday morning cartoons in the neighborhood of Ndosho in Goma, the provincial capital of conflict-affected eastern DRC. The movie hall is a street-side storefront using a diesel generator for power. Less than 3% of Goma's inhabitants have access to electricity, even less than the national average of 8%. This is the rule and not the exception in many crisis settings around the world. I've spent much of my career in communities like these, working for the United Nations in conflict-affected and post-conflict environments in the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and Central Africa. My work has involved engaging stakeholders at all levels to promote more peaceful, stable societies. A few years ago, I became aware of the renewable energy revolution sweeping much of the developed and developing world. Costs for solar, wind, and battery storage technology are now often more competitive than fossil fuels. However, the renewable energy revolution that we've witnessed hasn't reached many of the countries where I have worked, countries like DRC. So in my view, the renewable energy revolution has not been equitable, even though it is in these places like Ndosho where communities have the most to gain from the kind of transformation that is taking place elsewhere. So I sought out some like-minded folks, and we founded an organization called Energy Peace Partners. And we put together a team of experts who knew something about preventing conflict and promoting peace on the one hand, and about renewable energy development and finance on the other. We looked at this problem and developed a set of approaches that we thought could be part of the solution. Here are a few things that we learned. We noticed that the number of people affected by conflict today is unprecedented, a phenomenon increasingly exacerbated by climate change. A record 71 billion people are forcibly displaced. and humanitarian and peacekeeping expenditures today are at record levels. Interestingly, many of these conflict-affected communities are also some of the least electrified. We observed, as you can see from this map, that there are almost 1 billion people who live in 27 countries that are the most threatened by conflict and climate change, and at the same time have some of the lowest levels of electrification in the world. These became our target countries. We heard numerous anecdotes from the field that diesel markets in many crisis settings are often controlled by conflict actors. So this reliance on fossil fuels may actually be sustaining conflicts and perpetuating a vicious cycle. Most importantly, we learned that renewable energy investment in countries like DRC is extremely limited, and access to finance remains a key problem. Very little of the $450 billion in global climate finance last year went towards supporting renewable energy in fragile, energy-poor countries like Congo, given their unique contextual risks and challenges. And then we look closely at the $1 billion market in energy attribute certificates. These markets are an important part of the global carbon accounting system. EACs are virtual commodities that can be unbundled from the electricity produced from a renewable energy plant, traded, and used by the purchaser to make a renewable energy claim. Many companies meet their renewable energy goals in a number of ways, including by purchasing energy attribute certificates. This map shows countries that issue energy attribute certificates, known as Renewable Energy Certificates, or RECs in North America, Guarantees of Origin in Europe, and IRECs in the rest of the world. Energy attribute certificate markets are well established in North America and Europe and have been emerging in Asia and Latin America. However, as you can see, there are few markets for IRECs on the African continent, where 1 in 2 people do not have access to electricity. In fact, as of September of last year, there were only 3 IREC issuing countries in all of Africa. And if we superimpose the map of our target countries, again, those which are severely conflict affected, climate vulnerable, and poorly electrified, with current IREC issuing countries, you will see that there is little overlap. There are, in fact, few energy attribute certificate markets in our target countries. And so we developed something called the Peace Renewable Energy Credit, or PREC. The PREC takes the energy attribute certificate, or REC concept, and extends it to fragile, energy deficient countries, where the ability to invest in renewable energy has historically been limited. PRECs create value for renewable energy generated in countries like DRC, while allowing companies concerned about climate and sustainability to support specific and impactful projects in communities like Ndosho. So how does this work in practice? This is an image of our first Peace Renewable Energy Credit project, a 1.3 megawatt commercial off-grid solar mini-grid commissioned about 1 week ago by Nuru, our Congolese developer partner. It's sub-Saharan Africa's largest off-grid solar hybrid mini-grid. Nuru, incidentally, means light in Swahili. The system now provides renewable power to 700 households and anchor enterprise clients in an area that has never had grid infrastructure. Over the past year, we worked with Nuru to determine how additional revenue from the prospective sale of PRECs issued from this system could expand the scope of what they were doing in the community. The developer co-designed a project with community stakeholders that will entail the construction of mini-grid connected streetlights in Dosho that will improve safety and security, allow businesses to stay open at night, and serve as a potential deterrent to armed groups moving under cover of darkness. Revenue from the sale of PRECs from this solar mini-grid will fund these streetlights, allowing traditional renewable energy market actors who have never had an opportunity to support renewable energy in communities like these an opportunity to do so. Because of our efforts, the board of the IREC Standard Foundation in October authorized us to be a country issuer of IRECs in the DRC, making Congo only the 4th country in Africa to be an IREC issuing country and effectively kickstarting the Congolese energy attribute certificate market. I should add that a PREC is an IREC, or a traditional renewable energy certificate, with a supplementary label from our organization that will certify the peace-building benefits associated with this new renewable energy generation. Our aspiration is that beyond funding modest but important community impact projects, PRECs will soon help to de-risk renewable energy projects and make them more bankable for our developer partners working in these challenging settings, so that PREC sales can actually help to get renewable energy projects financed and built. Corporate PREC commitments would help Nauru scale and expand across all of DRC, starting with their 8-megawatt pipeline of solar in 2020 and followed by another 15 megawatts in their next phase. We are piloting PRECs in the DRC and intend to roll out PREC projects throughout sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. Our aim is to be an authorized PREC issuer in all 27 of our target countries and to create a functioning global marketplace for this new instrument. What's most exciting is that the PREC provides a market mechanism that links specific renewable energy projects in these settings with companies interested in supporting renewable energy in an impactful way. I'm happy to report that interest from companies so far has been most encouraging. We believe that solutions like the Peace Renewable Energy Credit can contribute to making a difference in communities like Ndosho, where increased access to sustainable and affordable power can be transformative. Thank you.
So, the conversation about energy is complicated because energy is, of course, part of everything that we do. For the 7 perspectives, well, actually 8 with Calvin, for the 8 perspectives you heard tonight, please join me in thanking Chris Turner, Jay Grewal, Cory Beaver, Nicholas Parker, Eryn Stewart, Councillor Calvin Walkwin, and Nagwan Al-Guneid and Sherwin Doss. Thank you all. Asante Sana. We are so pleased to once again work with our friends at Suncor. On behalf of Suncor, please welcome Vice President of Sustainability, John Mitchell.
Well, wow. For me, an evening night tonight is so thought-provoking. It's what I love about the partnership we have with the Walrus Foundation, the Walrus Talks, the partnership we have with the Globe Series, is it gets my mind going. It recharges my battery. I come to these events and we sort of go through the grind of the day-to-day of our work, and we're able to take stock and really think through some of the complexity of the challenge that faces us in the transformation of the energy system. It's why I love my work so much. These are complex issues, these are complicated issues, and they take a lot of thinking to get through. I've got the pleasure of sort of summarizing a little bit of what I heard tonight, and there was really three things that jumped out for me, and for those of you that know Chris Henderson, I'm borrowing your three, Chris. The first is leadership, the second is collaboration, and the third is innovation. And in each of those, on the leadership front, there's a real need to define how we lead, whether that's as a country, whether that's as a company, or whether that's as an Indigenous community. Define how we'll lead. That's going to help us get through the transformation. Collaboration. Collaboration is a muscle, and it's a muscle that we need to use and expand and apply to all these problems in different ways. We need to build our collaboration fitness if we're going to solve this challenge. And lastly is innovation. We need to think about innovation differently, and we heard lots of great examples about that today. Innovation isn't a widget that we go and buy. Innovation comes in the partnerships that we see with Indigenous communities. It comes with the way we think about peace and energy. The innovation is applied in all kinds of different ways, and we need to foster that intellectual curiosity that allows that innovation to flourish. And I thank you all for being here today, because you're demonstrating that. You're expressing your intellectual curiosity. You're fostering that creativity that's going to help us get through all these issues. So thank you. We're absolutely thrilled to be partners with the Walrus Talks and with Globe, and would like to thank the Vancouver Convention Centre as well for hosting us here tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, John, and thank you. As Eryn knows, Suncor shows up. That's an incredible story. I think you should shame those 72 companies that didn't show up. I would like to know who they are. Now, I'd like the audience, if you would stay seated for a moment. I'm going to invite our talkers to get up with Suncor and Mike, and they're going to go to the back to where the reception will be in a couple of moments. We're letting them get there first, so if you want to talk to them, they will be there. We call the reception the speaker petting zoo. So you're allowed to speak to them, but we don't want you to trap them, that thing you do where you trap them in their seat and they can't get a glass of wine. So we're going to give them a minute. The Walrus, we're a good bot. We're trying every day to provide different perspectives. And if you've enjoyed tonight's event, you can watch past 7-minute videos of the Walrus Talks. There are more than 800 7-minute talkers on our YouTube channel, which is available at thewalrus.ca. And to further support these kinds of conversations, please consider subscribing to the Walrus magazine. Just for you, only tonight, a full year's subscription to the Walrus, that's 10 issues, delivered to your door practically by me, because we are 28 people in a basement. That is the Walrus. It's just $25 for a year of the Walrus tonight. There's a table back there at the reception. Fake news is really, really cheap to make. Fact-based journalism is expensive, and we don't think it should be a luxury. So also please consider joining our community of more than 2,000 donors who support independent fact-based journalism at the Walrus. Even a small gift makes a very good impact. We do a lot with a nickel, I promise you. One of our donors here, I'm not going to mention her, but she is here, and she is a Vancouver supporter of one of our editorial fellows, paying that person's salary to learn how to be a future editor of fact-based journalism. So thank you. I know who you are. If you go back to that table to subscribe and donate, there's a free thing you can do. And that is to sign up for our newsletter, and that is how you will know that we are coming back to your town, or if you want to join us somewhere else that we are. And you can leave your business card in a bowl back there, and we are going to do 5 draws at the end of the evening, and we will be mailing each of those 5 individuals a package of all things walrus, which is literally a walrus toque and a tote bag and a tea towel and all kinds of groovy things. So please leave us your business card. And you can meet the Walrus team back there, our Director of Partnerships, Andrea Boyd. She wants to meet you. Tina, Kaylin, and Shema, who are running all of this stuff. I want to thank Theo and his entire crew here at the Convention Center for all of your help. I want to thank everyone at Suncor, John Mitchell, Arlene Strom, Lori Hewson, Stephanie Rozak, Eric Axford, Martha Hall Finley, and Ginny Flood. We really have a great partner there. Thank you also to our national partners, Inspire, Labatt Breweries of Canada, Air Canada, and Shaw for being with us everywhere we go. Please, all of you, join us at the reception where there is food, there is drink, and if you are there, there will also be good conversation. And remember, we are not the walrus. You are the walrus. Thank you.